documented burst in the property bubble in the last 18 months, but it hasn't stopped many of us from building our own homes, and the once-off housing market has not been hit as hard as developer housing construction.
So what is it about building your own home that continues to appeal to people, and what options are available to them? Fiona McLaughlin joins us this morning. Good morning to Fiona.
Good morning, guys.
There is something very attractive, I think, to most people about the notion, I'll say the notion of building your own home, but the reality is a very different thing.
It is.
What are maybe your kind of first checklist things you should think about?
The advantages of a self-built.
I suppose.
Well, obviously the reason people are still going for them because they can customise. The big thing is that they can customise according to their wants or needs. So if you need a big playroom for the kids, or if you want a home office or something like that, it's much easier to do that and to build according to the way that you'd really like to see a house built. Particularly, it comes at a time in people's lives when they've already lived in another house, typically, and they've learned from that experience what they would like in terms of building up. And obviously, when you move towards building something yourself, you can meet your needs a lot easier than, you know, living in a house designed by a developer or something like that. So it's proving still continues to be very, very popular. Last year there was about 17,000 individual houses built, or self-built houses. That's down to about 13%, but as a percentage of the overall build, it's gone from about 33% to 54%. So it really is more than holding its own. That's largely due to the reduction in the costs of site, reduction in the costs of labour, and generally just easier to get builders to do the job and that type of thing.
So okay, you can build your own design and specifications. Obviously you get to choose the location.
Within limits, obviously, you know, but obviously you can choose where you'd like to live. In terms of location, you very much need to look at a lot more people. One of the reasons actually people are sticking with self-build as well, or moving towards self-build, is because they're getting a lot more energy efficient and energy aware. So, you know, there isn't a huge, you know, it's becoming more prevalent, but there isn't a huge scope out there in terms of buying an energy efficient property in a development or in a new estate or that type of thing. So you can really go the whole hog and do your solar panel heating or your geothermal or whatever it is if you're building yourself.
And making those modifications to a house that's already built can be quite expensive, whereas if they're in a purpose-built,
it's much cheaper doing a purpose-built rather than retrofitting.
So the advantages are legion, there's plenty of them, and they all sound great. The disadvantages, we were just discussing the big one there in the break, planning.
Absolutely, planning.
It can be a night. We all know someone who's been through a planning nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I did actually meet somebody this week who told me that they'd gotten their planning in 8 weeks, and I nearly fell down because I said, I don't actually think I've spoken to somebody who's gotten through their planning in 8 weeks. It tends to be a very convoluted, very fraught process. And one thing I would like to warn people about this morning.
Would say, who do you know?
Yes, I mean it very much is, you know, and even I would advise people this morning to, if they're dealing with an architect, to talk to an architect who knows the system, maybe somebody who's worked within the local planning office previously, so that they are working with somebody who has an insight into the minds of the people in planning, because you really need that, because it's very, very hard to second guess them. And then even at that, if your architect comes up with the strategy, right, well, we'll do this first, so don't worry about the plan or the layout of the house or whatever, we'll come back to that later. This is our strategy to get planning on the site. Make sure, if you're getting into that sort of a strategy with your architect, that you actually agree on the price, not just for submission, but on achieving either a yay or a nay on the planning process, because you can ask, it can be a tap, an absolute tap, because if you go into an architect and you say, right, okay, I'm going with your strategy, and the strategy is 3 applications, there's nothing to stop them from charging you 3 separate times, and it could be $4,000 per each application, depending on what you're applying for and how you're going about it. So be very careful. Again, get it, as I always say, get it in writing. Do try and get 3 quotes again, as always. But in this case, you do need to be aware of the architect and their experience of the local planning process.
So the best tip from you really is to try and find someone who's worked in the system previously, because the advantage to that is huge. Unfortunately, that's the way it is in
Absolutely.
Ireland, which is actually a disgrace.
Unfortunately, I mean, because, you know, there isn't a system where it's absolutely clear in advance, you know, what exactly you will be allowed to get away with. I mean, an architect might know the local building vernacular, so he might know that red brick won't be allowed in a certain area, or dormers won't be allowed in a certain area. But he's still second guessing far more than somebody who's had experience within the process. So, and again, talk to architects and talk to their clients, talk to people that have used particular architects and have gone through the process already. That definitely helps. You know.
So planning is the big. Well, it doesn't have to be a disadvantage, but it's going to be time-consuming and
time-consuming, and it can be a significant cost factor as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Other disadvantages, Fiona?
Other disadvantages are obviously that it demands your time and attention. Now, again, you know, there are advantages to using an architect for overseeing the build. Either an architect, a surveyor. You can get professional project managers now, and the cost for that ranges somewhere between 8 and 15%, or 3 and 15% actually, if you're just using a project manager right up to. So it'll go from about 3% up to 15%. Then you have to decide, okay, which build route am I taking? Am I having the project manager? Am I having the architect? Am I going with a very experienced builder who's going to be on site every day, and I'm going to project manage along with them? Huge savings to be made on that, but you really need to be aware of the time and the effort that will take. And absolutely, you'll be learning on the job, and sometimes that's a very costly way to learn. Blast, I should have had the windows checked before, you know, putting them in or whatever.
But it is a learning process, isn't it? Like, I know you can safeguard yourself against some obvious things, but there's no way you'll see it all coming.
Again, it really boils down to personality. If you're somebody that copes with the unexpected very well, then get involved. There's a lot of people now who actually have the cash in the bank, and for one reason or another they may not have the work that they had before. So it may suit them now they can add value to the build by actually putting their time and effort into the build. I have to say though that if you're not that sort of person and not able to cope with unexpected events and occurrences,
there's nothing that will try your patience better than a builder.
Absolutely, you know,
building.
And definitely, you know, budget overruns is a huge downside as well.
Is that almost an inevitability, Fiona?
In the majority of cases, but it's not an inevitability. In the majority of cases it does happen, but it's not. I mean, in actual fact, a good architect will actually contract, you know, they'll develop a good contract for you so that there are penalties for going over in terms of time and cost. So that's the sort of protection that you can get by going with somebody to manage the whole project. But it's not inevitable, believe it or not, you know. Yeah.
And I have to say, everyone who I know who has built their home, they said it was hell while it was going on, but now they've been there, done it, they have their own home, and they're thrilled with the results. It is labour of love.
I have to say, there's so many more options in the market, and that's why we showed the Hansa House one. That is one of the fastest that's put up at the moment. There's a range of other options like Wolf Passive Homes, which are like the most passive home that you can buy on the market in Ireland at the moment. But even the timber frames, all worth looking at, but getting it up quick, which is what I liked about this, means that you save an awful lot of money in terms of renting another property or paying a second mortgage.
Possibly save your relationship while you're at it.
Fiona, on a totally different topic, very quickly, I want to mention that in the Sheraton Hotel in Athlone tomorrow night, there's a